Once you've finished editing your project, you're ready to render. Rendering is the process where After Effects will create another file outside of the project, most commonly a video file, like a QuickTime or a Windows Media file. But you can also render image sequences, still images, audio files, and even Flash video files. In this exercise, we're going to create a simple full resolution render of our little animations. One of the things I recommend you do before your final render is just preview the animation. So let's go to the preview panel and just load up a RAM preview. As you can see, the video looks a little long after our runner runs out. So what I'm going to do is actually only render a section of this video. I'll press the spacebar to stop playback and our runner disappears right around 7 seconds. So let's say at about 7:10 I want this render to finish rendering. So I'm going to press N, which will create an end to my workspace or the work area end. So here I could go ahead and just click on this yellow tab, and if I hold down Shift as I'm dragging it, it will snap to my current time indicator. Now notice in my info panel the work area duration has changed to 7 seconds and 10 frames, creating a total duration of 7 seconds and 11 frames for my render. To add this to the render queue, all we need to do is go back up in our composition and choose Add to Render Queue. Once we go to the render queue, notice it will pop up here in the timeline. Now I like to have my render queue a little higher in my view, so I'm going to go ahead and just click on these little grips to the left of the words, render queue, and drag it up to the top of my composition panel here until I get this long purple rectangle. Then when I let go, now my render queue is right here in the center of my workspace. Now there are three main settings you need to adjust for your renders. The render settings, which control the overall size of your render, the output model, which allows you to control the format, and then the output to area, which obviously specifies where you'd like to render your file to. We'll work kind of backwards. I'll start with the output to area, just click on the words that say not yet specified. Now I'm just going to go ahead and render this directly to my desktop, and if you want to rename the file, you can definitely rename it here. I'll just name mine rendering and then click save. So let's go to the output module. If you click on the arrow for the output module, there are a number of presets that have been built. Now since I'm teaching in a cross-platform environment where we have some people on Windows and some people on Mac, I'm just going to recommend that you leave it in the lossless setting. This is going to choose a lossless compression whether you're on Windows Media or QuickTime. Now just to show we can adjust those settings, if you click on the word lossless in here, that'll open up my options for this module settings. So here under the format, I'll leave it set to QuickTime, and under video output over here, I could set different options for my format to render. So for example, if I click on my format options here, I could change the video codec, which if you remember in our terms, codec stands for compress decompress. Now animation is the most traditional format to render a lossless codec, because it's automatically loaded on any system that has QuickTime loaded. So if you're not sure where your file is going to be played back, usually rendering in animation QuickTime is good to go. So if you're rendering Windows Media, just leave the default settings. The video quality will leave set 100, and I'll just click cancel since I didn't really want to change anything. If I did have alpha channel to my render, I could click here under my channels and render with the RGB and the alpha. But by default, we'll just leave the default settings, and if we had any audio, which it's saying we do, but there really isn't any audio to this section of the video clip, it's going to output audio. Now I don't necessarily want audio for this, so actually I just click on that pull down and turn the audio output off. If we did want to change the audio options, you can click on the Format Options button, just like for the video settings, then we can click OK. So if we go here to the render settings at the top, let's go and just click on those words and notice we have an option for quality, which default is set to best. Now the resolution is interesting, it's set to full resolution. Let's just click on that and change it to half resolution. Really what it means is it's going to render half size, 640 by 360. But it'll be full resolution, just half size. Let's leave it back set at the default settings of full, so it'll render a full 1280 by 720 file. If you have interlaced footage, this is where you can specify the field rendering, and then the most important setting under the render settings is right here. Notice this frame start is frame 0 and the frame end is 7:10. By default it's going to use the work area, and notice here on the left I have a time span pull down that says work area only. By default it'll choose that. If I choose length of comp, notice it'll go ahead and render the full 10 seconds. I never use this setting. I always leave it in the work area setting, just because when I work quickly I usually know if I'm loading up a work area that's all I want to render. So if you want to render a custom area or duration, you could just click on the custom button and only render a specific section of your render. This is extraordinarily helpful if you are only trying to isolate one little area to preview when you have a really complex project that takes a long time to render. I'll go ahead and click cancel since I don't want to change anything. And then the frame rate here. I just want to make sure to use the comps frame rate. That way I know it's going to render properly. So when I click OK, now I can just go ahead and click render, and you'll see a progress bar that moves across the screen. At any given time you can open up the current render settings to see what frame is rendering, and then when everything is finished rendering you'll get that wonderful chime. Okay, so once the render is finished, let's go ahead and check it out. I'm going to jump here to my desktop and just double click my file to preview it. And let me make sure it's small enough, and there we go. There's our QuickTime file. And obviously if you're on Windows it would be a Windows Media file, but as you can see when it comes to rendering, all you have to do is just specify the work area that you'd like to render, and then go up under your composition settings and add it to the render queue. Then just adjust the 3 main areas of your settings and go ahead and click render.